man had sized me up in a flash and sensed my ability before I'd written a single line for his paper. The wage offered by the Daily Intelligencer, even assuming, as they undoubtedly did, that the affair of the grass would be over shortly and my service ended, was high enough to warrant my buying a second-hand car. A previous unpleasantness with a finance company made the transaction difficult, with as little cash as I had on hand, but a phone call to the paper established my bona fides, and I was soon driving out Sunset Boulevard in a tomato-colored roadster, meditating on the long-delayed upsurge of my fortunes. The street was closed off by a road barrier quite some distance away, and tightly parked cars testified to the attraction of the expanding grass. Scorning these idle sightseers, I pushed and shoved my way forward to what had now become the focus of all my interests. The Dinkmans had lived in a city block, an urban entity. It was no pretentious group of houses, nor was it a repetitive design out of some subdividing contractor's greedy mind. Moderate-sized, medium-priced, middle-class bungalows. These were the homes of the Dinkmans and their neighbors, a sample from a pattern which varied but was basically the same here and in Oakland, Seattle and St. Louis, in Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, and Cleveland. But now I looked upon no city scene, no picture built upon the substantial foundation of Daddy at the office all day, fixing a leaky faucet of an evening, painting the woodwork during his summer vacation, or Mom, after a pleasant afternoon with the girls, unstintedly opening cans for supper and harassedly watching the cleaning woman who came in once a week. An alien presence, a rude fist through the canvas, negated the convention that this was a picture of reality. A cone-shaped hill rose to a blurred point, marking the burial place of the Dinkman house. It was a child's drawing of a cone-shaped hill, done in green crayon, too symmetrical, too evenly and heavily green to be a spontaneous product of nature. Man's unimaginative hand was apparent in its composition. The sides of the cone flowed past the doors and windows of the adjacent houses, blocking them as it had previously blocked the Dinkmans, but their inhabitants, forewarned, had gone. More than mere desertion was implied in their going. There was an implicit surrender, abandonment to the invader. The base of the cone, accepting capitulation and still aggressive, had reached to the lawns beyond, warning these householders, too, to be ready for flight, over back fences to dwellings fronting another street, and establishing itself firmly over the concrete pavement before the Dinkman's door. I would be suppressing part of the truth if I did not admit that for the smallest moment some perverted pride made me cherish this hill as my work, my creation. But for me it would not have existed. I had done something notable. I had caused a stir. It was the same kind of sensation, I imagine, which makes criminals boast of their crimes. I quickly dismissed this morbid thought, but it was succeeded by one almost equally unhealthy, for I was ridden by a sudden wild impulse to touch, feel, walk on, roll in the encroaching grass. I tried to control myself, but no willing of mine could prevent me from going up and letting the long runner slip through my half-open hands. It was like receiving some sort of electric shock. Though the blades were soft and tender, the stems communicated to my palms a feeling of surging vitality, implacable life, and ineluctable strength. I drew back from the green mass as though I had been doing something venturesome. For no matter what botanists or naturalists may tell us to the contrary, we habitually think of plant life as fixed and stolid, insensate and quiescent. But this abnormal growth was no passive lawn, no sleepy patch of vegetation. As I stood there with fascinated attention, the thing moved and kept on moving, not in one place, but in thousands, not in one direction, but toward all points of the compass. It writhed and twisted in nightmarish unease, expanding, extending, increasing, spreading, spreading, spreading. Its movement by human standards was slow, But it was so monstrous to see this great mass of verdure move at all that it appeared to be going with express speed, inexorably enveloping everything in its path. A crack in the roadway disappeared under it, a shrub was swallowed up, a patch of wall vanished. The eyes shifted from whole to detail and back again. The overrun crack was duplicated by an untouched one a few inches away. It, too, went. The fine tentacles on top of the mound reached upward, shimmering like the air on a hot summer's day, and near my feet hundreds of runners crept ever closer, the pale stolons shiny and brittle, supporting the ominously bristling green leaves. I hope I've not given the impression there was no human activity all this while, that nothing was being done to combat the living glacier. On the contrary, there was tremendous bustle and industry. The weed-burning crew was still fighting a rearguard action, gaining momentary successes here and there, driving back the invading tendrils as they wriggled over concrete sidewalk and roadway, only to be defeated as the main mass, piling higher and ever higher, toppled forward on the temporarily redeemed areas. For on this vastly thicker bulk, the smoky fingers of flame had no more effect than did the exertions of the scythemen, hacking futilely away at the tough intricacies, or the rattling reapers entangling themselves to become like waterlogged ships. But greatest hopes were now being pinned on a new weapon. A dozen black and sooty-looking tank trucks had come up, and from them, like the arms of a squid, thick hoses lazily uncoiled. Hundreds of gallons of dark crude oil were being poured upon the grass. At least 10 bystanders eagerly explained to any who would listen the purpose and value of this maneuver. Petroleum, deadly enemy of all rooted things, would unquestionably kill the weed. They might as well call off all the other silly efforts, for in a day or two, as soon as the oil soaked into the ground, the roots would die, the monster collapse, and wither away. I wanted with all my heart to believe in this hope. But when I compared the feeble brown trickle to the vast green body, I was gravely doubtful. Shaken and thoughtful, I went back to my car and drove homeward, reflecting on the fortuitousness of human actions. Had I not answered Miss Frances's ad, someone else would have been the agent of calamity. Had Mrs. Dinkman been away from home that day, another place than hers, or perhaps no place at all, might have been engulfed. On the other hand, I might still be searching for a chance to prove my merit to the world. It seemed to me suddenly man was but a helpless creature after all. End of Chapter 2, Part B.